So I was out at the local. Today's Wednesday. I was back issue digging like I do every Wednesday, basically dragging my poor daughter along with me. No, I'm kidding. She loves it. She gets herself comics and everything. So anyway, so I'm digging through back issue bins and I pulled out. Oh, double reveal! You only get to see part of the cover. Ha ha ha! Yeah. The Burning Earth, issue 5. Now, some of you guys who know enough about comics, or maybe specifically about a certain artist, you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's from Alex Ross's first published, professional work, Terminator, The Burning Earth. Okay, so that's why we're talking about it. Cool, yeah, I got an Alex Ross comic. And like, no, specifically, we're talking about issue 5 of this series. If you do not know why, you are just like the guy who ran the comic shop because he could not figure out why I was so excited about this. I told him this story and he laughed his ass off. He was like, man, I almost wish I'd have kept that. He was like, it was worth selling you the comic just to hear that story. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to share this with everybody. So now comics might not be familiar to a lot of guys who like didn't kick around comic shops in the late 80s to early 90s and weren't into like really boring property, like licensed properties. Now comics is basically famous for I'll describe them in the best way possible and the most insulting way possible, which is probably the best way possible. Now comics is like a shit version of Dark Horse Comics. Except like no creator owned stuff, none of the cool stuff like Sin City or Concrete. No, forget all of that shit. Only the just ridiculous licensed properties. Like Now Comics was like their claims to fame were like Mr. T and the T-Force and like Green Hornet. Married with Children was one of their big sellers. Obviously, Terminator, like Fright Night was a big deal. They did a 3D Fright Night comic. I mean, just a terrible lineage for a company. But this cover is awesome. So there you go. Can you see? Do you see yet? So like if you don't see like if you don't see what I'm talking about, if you don't understand, don't worry. I'll put a like blown up digital version in case, like especially for you guys who are watching on your phones and stuff, it's just going to be way too small. Great cover. Don't get me wrong. Like this is just it's Alex Ross. Like he's good. Even in 1990 first published stuff, he's freaking good. But what's awesome is if you look in this random collection of numbers and letters over here, right here, backwards, Now Comics Bloz. And I saw an image of this comic years ago. I have dyslexia and dysgraphia. Very severe dyslexia and dysgraphia. And when you have dyslexia and dysgraphia, like, together, the way that I see words and letters and numbers is constantly, it's a weird, like, jumble. They move, and letters and numbers often seem like they're rotating because my brain has a very difficult time recognize what dyslexia and dysgraphia is a disorientation between being able to tell up from down and left from right. So if someone says to go left, I will basically almost always go right. Like I am a 35-year-old man and I literally still go left. Like I have to look at my fingers, and even then sometimes I'm still messed up. When I saw this comic, I fell on the floor because for me, like, this just pops. I can read upside down. I can read in mirror image. So this to me was just like, it might as well have been broadcast in bright neon colors. It was hilarious. And like, if you know anything about Alex Ross, it seemed really out of character for him. I figured maybe he was young or whatever. But no. So, like, this is published in July of 1990, right? In 1985, Now Comics starts. It's like this indie publisher. They're from Chicago. They did really well, actually. And they got bought up by this company called CPI. And I think it's Caputo. It might be Saputo. It's Caputo. Caputo Publishing Inc. And if you're a kid from the 80s, like, you definitely remember CPI. Like, they went so far as to license their licensed properties on cereals and drinks. Like, if you remember the Real Ghostbusters cereal, that was a CPI cereal. The same guys who made your, like, Real Ghostbusters comic were helping make your Real Ghostbusters cereal. No shit. Like, the High C Ecto Cooler, that was a brilliant marketing ploy by CPI, licensing over to High C. And the reason that Ecto Cooler went off of the market is because in 1991, Now Comics declared Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, 1991? And I'm like, yeah, pretty early on in 1991 as well. And this is July of 1990. So I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And I started reading some articles. Now, I've said before, like, Alex Ross is a very level-headed guy. He's very well-spoken. He seems fairly conservative in his speech, and, like, he doesn't like to slander or burn on the industry. Like, he seems kind of like one of those guys who will artfully pass on a question rather than say something to needlessly, like, attack or hurt someone in his head. And it's somewhat annoying sometimes, somewhat very commendable. But, like, when I started reading articles, I found really quickly why this cover happened. They never paid Alex Ross. This is his first professional work, right? And they never paid him for it. And, like, the guy at the comic shop asked me, like, why did he keep doing the series? And I was like, well, dude, it's his first published work. And he said in interviews he felt like he had to finish it. Why would you feel like you had to? Well, number one, it's your first ever published work, so you've got to have stuff to show people. Number two, if you stop doing this and, like, now Comics, you know, ends up pulling out, or anybody in the management who likes Now Comics or had a vested interest in not looking like a bunch of, like, clown shoes went on and were like, hey, yeah, you know, we did pay Alex Ross, but he says we didn't, and then he quit turning in stuff, so we only had 3 issues out of this 5-issue series. Your career would be done. Done. That was his whole mentality. Like, I've got to have something to show people, and if any of these guys ever turn on me and lie, I don't have any leg to stand on. There's nobody to go and vouch for me. These are the guys who would vouch for me. So this comic represents, like, it does make me laugh. It also makes me, you know, obviously pissed off at Now Comics, because, like, dude, not paying your writers and artists, whatever the situation, I do not care. If you are going into bankruptcy, cease production on stuff, let your staff know what's going on. They had these guys now at the top of their game, were number 3 in the industry. They were a multi-million-dollar company. They had 100 full-time employees and a staff of freelancers working for them. You do not just stop paying people like that. You have to be like, dude, we're going down. The ship is sinking. This, obviously, the bubble has burst. We're going down. We got to stop production. Tell everybody, and we'll get them their money after we're out of Chapter 7, and we've bailed our own corporate out of the sling. That is not what they did. So instead, we end up with this amazing Now Comics Blows cover. For indeed, Now Comics does blow. So, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you learned a little bit of something. If you did, get in the comment section below and let me know, like, hey, I dug this. I like these, like, shorter videos to consume in between your, like, huge monumental undertakings of telling me about all of this shit that I don't really care about, and you're trying to hoist your ideas and viewpoints and your style choices on me. But I like this. This is nice. Short little trivia and tidbits. I can do this. Like, in the comment section, let me know, like, I like this. Like, this is a waste of time. Don't do any more of these. Let me know. I sincerely want to know. But seriously, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And I know I said I found this in a bin, but I did. I found this in a bin at a local shop. So, if you've got a shop maybe downtown or uptown or around town or over one town, man, they're going the way of the dinosaur. So get out there, support your local shops. They're closing all the time. Go out there, buy something, bring it home. And when you do, keep reading comics.